Chad Beynon, who is the Senior Gaming, Lodging, and Theater Analyst. Appreciate you for joining us again, man. Hopefully I got that last name right, by the way.
That was perfect. Really appreciate it.
Yes. I've been practicing all morning, so I appreciate it, brother. You know, you and I had a great prep call, and I wish we could record that, but we'll kind of replicate the conversations here. Quickly, just kind of give us an overview of your background so the folks know what point of view you're coming from.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I've been a sell-side equity research analyst for 20 years. 17 of those have been in the gaming, lodging, theater space. So I've worked here at Macquarie for 17 of those years, and I also run the whole research department. So we cover about 35 companies. 20 of these are in the gaming space. So think, everything from DraftKings to Macau to Vegas to regionals to any new tech company that's coming alive. And then we keep an eye on other companies in the space, whether it's esports or social gaming and different adjacency sectors.
Perfect. And of course, I know that since you mentioned you cover quite a bit of different stocks, we'll go ahead and put up your disclosure here in just a moment. So there you go. We'll leave it up for a few seconds so folks can read about it. Let's go ahead and now, I talked about the trends, right? You can bet on random things. You can bet on how long the national anthem will be at the Super Bowl. You can bet on the coin toss. You can bet on the outcome of the game, the spreads, the player props is what I want to focus on as well. But innovation, what are you kind of seeing that's driving the growth in the sports betting industry right now?
Look, I think sports betting it's only 6 years old. So the apps that started here were somewhat clunky. We're seeing improvements on all the mobile apps. And there's new ones that just came out, right? So you just had Fanatics and ESPN Bet. They just launched in the past couple months. FanDuel, DraftKings, a lot of their competitors have improved. I'd say the major change that we're seeing is in-play betting, right? So you can actually stream some games on the app. And then you have other companies that are helping these B2C operators, and they're giving them more data, right? You have companies like Genius Sports, Sport Radar. They're collecting the data from the arenas, and then they're layering on other things. So on Amazon, if you watch Thursday Night Football, there's a couple different ways to watch it. One looks like you're watching Madden, and one looks like the regular broadcast. So little things like that, I think, are engaging. Consumers like it, right? There's different types of viewerships, and that's been a huge boost to overall engagement.
And, you mentioned, and you also have Nickelodeon. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but that's a lot of people prefer SpongeBob and Patrick to commentate than, an Iron Eagle, if you will, or somebody of that, or Al Michaels or somebody. So it's interesting. And I think that's the great way to kind of capture the younger audience to get in the game as well, as viewership did suffer for quite some time. But thanks to Taylor Swift, we did see an uptick during the Chiefs run as well. What sectors, or I guess more importantly, what factors do you think are most important when you're assessing investment opportunities in the markets themselves?
Growth is definitely important, right? So you have sports betting growing roughly 50% in 2023. That's going to peter off a little bit just because we had a lot of new states. Same store growth is pretty strong. We saw that 30% in the first quarter. So I'd say growth is one of the things. Regulation and moats around that, I think, are very important. The way that licensing works in the U.S., kind of restricts the number of players, right? So if it's a black market or a gray market, anyone can develop a site and try and work with the consumer. So that's the second thing. And then obviously valuation, right? You can't have valuations that are significantly higher than some of these high growth software companies. So yeah, I'd say growth, the business model, overall engagement, and then just investor appetite to learn about a new sector. I think that's helped with the sports betting. It's not this esoteric type of new thing that people are and I think that's been one of the issues with esports. The average investor who's investing or who's running one of these institutions, they might not be familiar with what esports are, but they might watch, Thursday Night Football, Sunday Night Football. So I think that helps as well.
Yeah, and then we've got a question from the chat, which I'll get to towards the end of the interview. They want to know thoughts on PENN and IGT. I'll get to that because you mentioned how you want to evaluate certain companies as well, and we'll put up the disclosure when we do talk about that towards the end. But you mentioned esports, something that I am a huge, huge fan of, involved in the industry as a broadcaster as well. I mean, we've got a $6.5 million tournament happening in Saudi Arabia. So, people talk about esports winter, but then you've got a $6.5 million tournament. I feel like that's really going to help elevate where esports can be, kind of like where it was during the 2020 era with COVID. That's what everyone paid attention to as well. But I don't want to just focus on esports itself, but also from the betting aspect. Do you feel like that's the next level of growth where we can maybe have some regulation around it and people can then now bet on their, favorite players? Because like we're in this creator economy, right? Influencers have more influence than say actors or actresses. So what are your thoughts on sports betting and esports and the intersection there?
Yeah, we've seen fits and starts with esports, particularly here in the United States, with different arenas or locations and kind of the business model that would be best for that sector. I think the restrictions right now is, one, it's obviously highly skewed towards younger audiences. So I think 90 or 95% of people are under the age of 42. So it's kind of very focused. In terms of betting, that's been something that has taken a little while, right? Maybe now we see more of this in-play type of betting that we see in sports betting kind of come over to esports. I think the game diversity is improving, right? Before it was just a couple major games. Obviously, Counter-Strike is 50%. It's also skewed a little bit more towards Europe. So what we've seen is cross-selling with esports makes a little bit more sense to soccer, to tennis, to NBA. Yeah. Esports players and viewers actually don't like betting on the NFL. So that's something everyone's trying to work out. But I do think eventually, if it's legalized in every state, we could see a tab on a lot of these apps that show esports, right? People were betting on ping pong and other, cricket and other sports we weren't familiar with during COVID. And that ended up being, 5 or 10% of the betting. Why couldn't esports be at that level? Yeah. And because of the prize pools, hopefully that helps viewership, sponsorship, similar to what we saw with the Kentucky Derby. Kentucky Derby is exploding. There's Japanese horses, there's European horses. The sponsorships are coming from all angles just because people are engaged.
Chad, during COVID, you kind of mentioned how other sports saw an uptick in sports betting. I mean, I had friends who were betting on simulations of video games where there's no human element to it, but it's just a computer versus computer. What's the outcome going to be? And you had bets on that. And I'm like, this is where we are. We thought we would see flying cars, but no, we're betting on AI versus AI. And I love the angle that you put, by the way. I didn't know this. I learned something new about how esports gamblers or bettors or watchers don't really bet on the NFL. So that's a very detailed insight that you have that I didn't know about. Now let me go to the question from the chat. And I'll go ahead and phrase this a little bit differently, but they want to know thoughts on Penn and IGT. And once again, we'll put up your disclosure so the folks at home know the standpoint of the company that you're representing, you as well. What are your thoughts on the stocks that are in the market, right? The companies that are in the market. Are there any that you like, that you don't like, that you're able to comment on? I want to respect the position you're in as well, but give us some thoughts. And if you can, on Penn and IGT included.
Sure. IGT, I'm unfortunately going to have to punt because of a role that our bank is playing in the merger with
Understood.
It's ongoing right now. And then I can talk to the just overall background of that sector. Penn is one that is very interesting here. It received 3 downgrades by major banks in the past month. This is a stock, as a reminder, they did a deal, or they acquired The Score in Canada for almost $1.5 billion. They did Barstool acquisition for about $500 million. They canceled out the Barstool and they just started the deal with ESPN Bet, where they're committed to spending about $150 million in advertising dollars. ESPN Bet has stock in Penn, and they also have warrants. So our position on Penn, we like it. We have a $28 price target. We think the value of the land-based business is worth about $20, and then the ESPN Bet deal was worth $8. Initial volume market share when they launched right around Thanksgiving in November spiked to around 10%, and that's come down as they pulled back on promos. But I think the app is getting better. A lot of our due diligence tells us that the app has really moved up in terms of the rankings. We're probably not going to see most of this impact until NFL. The schedule release came out last night, but that's not going to be until September. But since we saw 3 major downgrades on the stock, and the stock is kind of held in the $16 to $17 level, I think that's the floor. Obviously, the upside is coming from ESPN Bet, $28 price target. That could be higher if it's more successful. Yeah. And then I'd say, just kind of switching gears back to the IGT. I can't comment on that, but the lottery business. IGT just reported earnings. The lottery business is very strong and stable. They gave guidance on their call yesterday. Other companies that participate in the space are good. And then their other part of the business is the supplier space. And from what we saw from their competitors, we actually like Light and Wonder, ticker LNW. They're scheduled to grow 10 to 15% per year. And that's mainly in selling slots, leasing slots, and having exposure to the iGaming industry.
That is awesome. And I'm writing those tickers down. You might not be able to see my right hand, but I'm writing down the last one that you mentioned there. So I appreciate the insight, and I appreciate you being upfront about things that you can and cannot comment about. Totally understand your position. Let's talk about some challenges, right? Legalization is absolutely one of them. I'm here in Georgia. You can't legally sports bet, which is why I have to go to Detroit to be able to do that, right? Where our headquarters is, thankfully. So the company can give you some perks there. But what are some other challenges that you're seeing for this industry?
I think regulation is the biggest one. Over 50% of the states have sports betting, but only 12% of the states have iGaming. So that's betting on slots, blackjack, baccarat, live dealer, which is kind of like, Price is Right, carnival type games, kind of like a Plinko type of game. So that's only legal in 12% of states. iGaming actually generates more than sports betting. So if we see legalization, 9 states talked about it last year. If we see some momentum there, after the 2024 presidential election, I think these stocks will run nicely. So regulation is one of these items. The second thing is college prop bets, right? This kind of became a hot button issue a few months ago. It sounds like something that could and should go away. It's only 1% to 2% of total bets, but we really shouldn't be putting these college student athletes in the position where, they're getting feedback from people that lost wagers on how much that player scored. And then I'd say the last thing is really just around that mix between online and land-based. In the United States, only 10% of total gaming revenues come from online. You have other European markets where it's 40, 50%. So it's kind of that trade-off. We can't see much cannibalization for online onto land-based because land-based generates a lot of jobs, a lot of tax revenues. So that's where the regulators run into some of these friction points. But outside of that, really happy in terms of where 2023 finished, the growth in 24, and kind of the outlook going forward.
You mentioned the NFL side, the college football side of things, and absolutely, especially yes, you have the NIL, and yes, players are able to get some money for their likeness, but let's not pretend the offensive lineman, who's no one's ever heard of, number 67, is getting any money compared to the quarterback, the wide receiver, or the running back. And they have a good amount of incentive to possibly let it, you know what I mean? It's reality. So I'm okay talking about it with you, but those are the type of challenges that we're going to have to see as well. At the NBA level, you've seen a player recently that was caught in a scandal and banned for life as well. So a lot of responsible betting, not just for the consumer, but also for the professional and the player on the other side to handle and behave in a certain way as well. Any final thoughts from me? I really appreciate your insights on this, but I want to give you the floor. If there was anything else that you were hoping I would ask you that I could talk to you about, the floor is kind of yours to talk to our viewers.
Yeah, thanks. I would say, DraftKings kind of set the tone. That stock was up almost 150% last year. It's up again this year. That's not the only way to engage in sports betting and iGaming. There's a lot of other names in the space that have exposure there that will, have similar type of growth. Regulation is the biggest thing, but we like the sector. We like what we're hearing from the consumer. It was a little bit weak in January on the land-based side because of some tough weather that we saw throughout the United States. But post Q1 earnings, which we're just wrapping up really today, I think the industry looks good and the valuations are attractive compared to historical levels and compared to other sectors.
All right. Thank you so much for your insight. Again, that is Chad Beynon, who is from Macquarie. Did I pronounce that correctly? Hopefully I did. Hopefully Benjamin doesn't email me later on, but
that's great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time and insights. Really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.